What is Star Wars Legends, formerly known as the Expanded Universe? Also called EU for short. This shitty mess of stories was everything outside of the films made prior to 2014, including books, comics, video games, and more. But was this material ever canon? The answer? No, it was not. George Lucas has stated in the past several times that this shitty apocrypha was not part of his world. Therefore it was never canon in the first place. In July 2001, Lucas gave his opinion on the matter of what is canon in Star Wars during an interview with Cinescape magazine. There are two worlds here, explained Lucas. There's my world, which is the movies. And there's this other world that has been created, which I say is the parallel universe, the licensing world of the books, games, and comic books. They don't intrude on my world, which is a select period of time. But they do intrude in between the movies. I don't get too involved in the parallel universe. Further, in an August 2005 interview in Starlog magazine, I don't read that stuff. I haven't read any of the novels. I don't know anything about that world. That's a different world than my world. But I do try to keep it consistent. The way I do it now is they have a Star Wars encyclopedia. So if I come up with a name or something else, I look it up and see if it has already been used. When I said other people could make their own Star Wars stories, we decided that, like Star Trek, we would have two universes, my universe and then this other one. They try to make their universe as consistent with mine as possible. But obviously they get enthusiastic and want to go off in other directions. Another noteworthy exchange between Lucas and an interviewer appeared in the May 2008 edition of Total Film magazine. They have their own kind of world. There's 3 pillars of Star Wars. I'll probably get in trouble for this, but it's okay. There's 3 pillars, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. I'm the Father, Howard Rothman, president of Lucas Licensing, is the Son, and the Holy Ghost is the fans. This kind of ethereal world of people coming up with all kinds of different ideas and histories. Now these 3 different pillars don't always match, but the movies and TV shows are all under my control and they are consistent within themselves. Howard tries to be consistent, but sometimes he goes off on tangents and it's hard to hold him back. He once said to me that there are 2 Star Trek universes, there's the TV show and then there's all the spin-offs. He said that these were completely different and didn't have anything to do with each other. So I said, okay. Go ahead. In the early days I told them that they couldn't do anything about how Darth Vader was born. For obvious reasons, but otherwise I pretty much let them do whatever they wanted. They created this whole amazing universe that goes on for millions of years. Lucas continues. I've left pretty explicit instructions for there not to be any more features. There will definitely be no episode 7-9. That's because there isn't any story. I mean, I never thought of anything. And now there have been novels about the events after episode 6, which isn't at all what I would have done with it. The Star Wars story is really the tragedy of Darth Vader. That is the story. Once Vader dies, he doesn't come back to life, the Emperor doesn't get cloned, and Luke doesn't get married. Leland Chi, who you pathetic EU fanboys like to continuously quote, stated the EU was never canon and only the films and the Clone Wars TV series was canon. Going back on what he said before, what George did with the films and the Clone Wars was pretty much his universe. Chi said he didn't really have that much concern for what we were doing in the books and games. So the expanded universe was very much separate. Leland Chi, 2017, Sci-Fi Wire. Dave Filoni, who has worked the closest with George out of everybody at Lucasfilm, says himself that the EU was basically fan fiction. For me and my training here at Lucasfilm, working with George, he and I always thought the expanded universe was just that. It was an expanded universe. Basically it's stories that are really fun and really exciting. But they're a view on Star Wars, not necessarily canon to him. That was the way it was from the day I walked into Lucasfilm with him all through Clone Wars, everything we worked on. He felt the Clone Wars series and his movies were what was actually the reality of it all, the canon. Dave Filoni 2016. Timothy Zahn, the godfather of the expanded universe who EU fanboys worship, even stated the EU was just apocryphal nonsense. They're there to be enjoyed as unofficial legends. But, as Zahn also points out, the expanded universe wasn't really ever official regardless of what the fans thought. Timothy Zahn 2017. So there you have it, the expanded universe was never canon. Straight from the mouth of George Lucas himself. He says the EU is a different world than his. And it's a parallel universe to his world. Lucas also makes it quite clear that Dark Empire never happens. Luke never marries Mara Jade, so therefore that means none of the EU crap ever happened. George Lucas also ignored and changed things the expanded universe did and established multiple times. According to the EU, the Galactic Republic was said to be 25,000 years old. And George Lucas ignored the EU and made it 1,000 years old in Episode 2. Boba Fett had a completely different backstory that Lucas ignored. Fett was stated to be a Mandalorian supercommando named Jaster Muriel. Attack of the Clones established he was a clone of Jango Fett. Furthermore, George has stated that neither Boba or Jango are Mandalorian despite the expanded universe depicting them as Mandalorian. The Clone Wars was originally stated in the Thrawn books to be a war between the Galactic Republic and an army of mad clones running rampant. Sorry, but the fact George ignored things is more proof the EU was garbage fan fiction and nothing more. Also considering the fact there was separate G canon, T canon, C canon levels, and so on. Only further proves what has been said by Lucas. G canon being George Lucas's universe, and C canon being the separate world/parallel universe described by Lucas himself. So there you have it. The expanded universe was never ever canon. Sorry but hurt Legends fanboys. No amount of quotes from some random guy who isn't George Lucas will ever change that fact that the Star Wars expanded universe was never canon, apocryphal, fan fiction.